This show is part of the HeadStuff podcast network.
My name is Seán Ronayne and welcome to the Seán Chorus. So I've got two questions which I'm sure you'll want to be answered. First of all, what exactly is this? So in summary, this is a space where I'm going to be gushing over nature, mostly Irish nature, but sometimes nature from further afield, especially Catalonia. So that's where my partner Alba's from. So the name, the Seán Chorus, is of course a pun on words, with the Dawn Chorus, one of my favourite collective sounds. My friend Keifo from college said to me, if you ever start a podcast, this is what you need to call it. And I kept it in my back pocket ever since. So I guess there'll be a number of approaches I'll take with this. Obviously, it's going to be saturated with wildlife sound, not just birds, but pretty much everything that moves and makes a sound, or doesn't move and makes a sound. So some episodes will feature me discussing these sounds and my adventures and how I recorded them and the mishaps and so on. And then others I intend to bring like-minded or interesting people on to have a chat and a bit of fun as well. So the next question is, who am I? So I can't assume that people know who I am. My name is Seán Ronayne. I'm an ornithologist. I am an author, a wildlife sound recordist, but most importantly, I'm from Cork. Cove to be precise. I think I'll get into who I am and my background in a lot more detail as I go through, and I'm going to treat this episode as an introductory piece to let people know my story a little bit before I get into the depths of all of the wildlife sound. At this moment in time, I have approximately 30,000 wildlife sound recordings in my laptop and various hard drives. 20,000 of these are bird sounds, but there's so much more than bird sound. So I'm going to start with a little mystery sound. And there'll be a lot of these because of the fact that I have so many recordings. I get some really strange things, especially when I leave microphones out for long periods of time. I'm not there. So different animals and birds find my microphones and they, sometimes they speak into them. So this is one I recorded recently. I'll give you one clue. It's not a bird. I guess it's not what you expected. It sounds a little bit like a horse. And the very first time I heard it, I thought it was a horse until it started to do different things. It actually is a badger. So this is what a badger sounds like when it's running and playing. So I think it's grunting at another badger as it runs up a little valley from the sea where it was foraging. So you can expect a lot of different sounds like that. And then of course birds are my go-to. And I'll tell you a lot more about that as I go further along. But I'm going to play one song in particular here which really stands out. One of the reasons that I listen to birdsong, I couldn't imagine a world without birdsong or a life without listening to it. But one of the reasons now as an adult that I listen to it is because it brings me so much calm. Life is busy, life is hectic, it's stressful. And I find that when I go into the woods or when I go to those wild spaces, listening to birds just completely brings me back down. And this isn't just me, this is scientific fact. There are so many studies which have been conducted which show that stress levels are through the roof in loud urban spaces, and the opposite is true of natural spaces. And when you combine something like bird song or even insect sounds with flowing water or rustling leaves, I think there's nothing better to calm you and bring you down. So this song captures all of that. It's a bird called a mistle thrush, which is closely related to blackbird. And they sing on the tops of the tallest trees. They sing really early too. So it's a great bird to bring you out of the grey winter, because they start singing in January and February. And one of their nicknames actually is Stormcock. And this is because of the fact that they'll sing in all weather, including the worst of storms and gales. So this is a mistle thrush singing from the top of a treetop in Rosstellan Wood in East Cork with a stream running past. So to me, that's it's an amazing thing to listen to. I had one singing outside my bedroom window this morning, and it's really special. I can't get enough of it. Another reason I want to do this podcast is to bring this joy to people who may not understand or may not realize that we have this on our doorstep, because it is there. It's all around us. And I think that, it's no secret that Irish wildlife and global wildlife is suffering because of the human footprint. But I think that the more we connect with it and the more we realize how beautiful it is, the better chance we have of saving it. So I'm going to do my very best to make as many people fall in love with nature as I possibly can. And I don't think that that's a difficult thing to do. As I said, I have 20,000 recordings of birds. What else is in there? I've got a little bit of everything. I've got all kinds of mammals. I've got foxes. I've got badgers. I've got otters. I've got pine marten. I've got hedgehog, rabbit. I've got seals. I've got whales. I have the odd rogue human in there that found my microphone out in the wilds. I've got mollusks, so those are slugs, snails, both terrestrial and marine. They're noisy eaters, all of them, and they've got a lot to say. And then you've got the Orthoptera, which is just a scientific name for crickets and grasshoppers. And so we have several species of both. One in particular is very interesting. So you've got Roussel's bush cricket, and that's a species which was only discovered a few decades ago in Ireland, and it was discovered at just one site, and it's since spread to at least one other site. I'm not going to say where that is because they're really sensitive, and it would be a bad thing to draw many people to that place, but they sound very distinctive. So I'm sure you're familiar with the sound of a wet, buzzing pylon. So on a rainy day, you often hear pylons buzzing and spitting. So Roussel's bush cricket sounds like that. So I'm going to play that for you there now. So this cricket, it occurs in really lovely maritime grassland, often in kind of little dune systems, or in this case, it was just like a little meadow right up alongside the beach. So you've got the sounds of the sea. You've got the sound of, not a singing herring gull, it's like a wailing herring gull, which is to me, it's like a sea shanty. It's a gorgeous thing. And then you've got this Roussel's bush cricket, which sounds like a wet, buzzy pylon. So here it is. I think if I didn't tell you that was a cricket, you would think it's an electrical error or a buzzy wet pylon. So what else is there? Actually, I didn't play a slug or a snail for you. I bet you're wondering what they sound like. So one of the first times I ever heard a slug was in Thailand. We were wandering about in Thailand. Myself and Alba went, I'll tell you more about Alba later. Myself and Alba went backpacking in Thailand for 3 months. And I remember seeing the most enormous slug you could ever imagine. Everything seemed a little bit bigger over there. And this slug, it was like a small snake, a small slimy wet snake. And I leant down to have a look at it, much to the amusement of the locals. And I had a listen, and it was making sound. I discovered that it was a noisy eater. And I didn't have a microphone then, but I've since recorded it in several locations. This example that I'm going to show you is actually a slug that woke me up in the middle of the night when I was camping in Tecumseh Lake in Wexford. And it sounded like this thing was trying to eat its way through the tent to get to me. So here it is. The march of the brain-eating slugs. Thankfully, it didn't make its way through the tent, but I did get out to record it. Let's play a rogue human. So this is actually me. By the way, I'm a manic sound recordist. So at any moment in time, I have up to 8 microphones that are running 24 hours a day, hidden around the country. Now, don't bother going out to try to find them, because you never will. They're wrapped in a camouflage cloth and grass, and they're well hidden, often in places where you don't want to put your hands. So these run 24 hours a day to monitor birds and wildlife around the country. Sometimes when I go to find them, I panic because I think someone has stolen it. But it's actually because I hid it a month ago. I can't really remember where I put it, and I've hidden it so well, I think it's gone. And I often record myself because it's running 24 hours a day, panicking trying to find it. So this is me. I'm not really panicked, but you can tell it's like an Easter egg hunt. Oh, I'm right here apparently. Where am I? This is it. Oh yeah, so this is it. So should be right around. That's the family-friendly clip, I suppose. I can't play the other rogue humans, really. So what else is there? There's frogs. I learned a very fancy word for what I'm about to play for you. What I'm about to play is a collective amplexus. So amplexus is a scientific word for the mating embrace of common frogs. And it's a gorgeous thing to hear in Ireland because it's a sign of a healthy wetland, a healthy stream, a healthy pond. And this one particular place was in Cove, in my friend's garden actually, and it was it looked like the water was boiling, but it was all of the frogs and the frog spawn moving around in there. So this is them. Well, that's a fox, by the way. So that was a fox screaming in the background, which you can see where the myth of the banshee came from, because it does sound like a wailing creature of a thing. Barn owl sounds very similar. So what other mad things do I have? I mean, we could sit here all day and play all the curiosities, so I'll save some of them, or I'll save many of them for other episodes. But I've got one more to play to you before I go into something else. Bees. I have it written down here as bees and other buzzy things. Because, when I have a microphone out, I'm not there and it's recording for a month with me not there. So I have to assume that what I'm hearing is a bee. It could be a hoverfly, it could be, I don't know, it could be a bluebottle. So this is a buzzy thing, and I don't think it's a bee, I think it's a fly. And what happens is it buzzes into appearance, and then it clearly lands on my microphone and starts to walk around. And the microphone is so sensitive, you can hear, look, have you ever heard the footsteps of a buzzy thing, a fly? You're going to know. It's not the thing you expect to wake up in the morning and listen to a fly walking down the street. But there you have it. So the dawn chorus is something that you can't help but be moved by. It's such a powerful, gorgeous display of eclectic nature. Bees can have the same effect if you're in a really healthy spot. And so the one that I'm going to play for you next, I have it written down here as heath soundscape. Heath, it refers to the habitat that it was recorded in. So in Ireland, you've got dry heat and you've got wet heat. So in this spot, it was dry heat. Dry heat is it's made up of a lot of heather. So you have the pink flowered heather in the uplands, and this was in the spring, and it was a riot of bees. And I just sat there and I listened to the bees, the grasshoppers, you'd meadow pipits displaying overhead, and it was just a gorgeous thing to be immersed in. So I'll give you a snippet of that here now. Swallows going overhead. So that's just a little introduction to what I'm about, what my work is about. But I guess that's only one part of it. My work, it also encapsulates the human experience, I think. We all have our own experiences of the world, and mine was very much defined by a life absolutely submerged in nature. I just couldn't get enough of it from day one. And I'm gonna bring you through some of those early moments, and you'll kind of get a feel for who I am and why I took this route. So how did it all begin? For me, there was never another option other than to love nature. So I was a nightmare of a kid in that I was completely hyperactive. And so my father loved nature as well, as did his father, Pops. Pops, we used to call him. My mother was very supportive of me. But she wasn't really an outdoors person. So she would get me all the books. She would drop me to the nature reserves. She would get me binoculars. She would always get these lovely things for me for my birthday and so on. But my father was the guy who got stuck with me out in the field, jumping in the mud, falling through bramble bushes, all sorts of stuff. And when I was very, very young, maybe about a year old, he discovered that if he put me into the pram and brought me down the hill, wheeled me down the hill to the local nature reserve, Coskinny, I turned into a quiet little lamb. And I was just completely blown away by everything. I was watching the butterflies, I was watching the bees, I was watching the swallows. I was, in love with the little swans, or the big swans that would come to take lettuce from us at the feeding station. And of course I couldn't talk. And so my dad, what he would do is he would imitate the sounds that were around us. And I would respond, and I would beam, and I would start laughing, and I would start pointing to do it again. And he understood that there was something happening. There was something that I was feeling with the nature around me, and it made me absolutely bloom. And so that's what we did. They knew that if they brought me out into nature, I wasn't that wild child anymore. I was just this ecstatic, little boy, and that's what we did. And so my dad, he would come up with all these sounds, and what does the cow say? Moo. What does the frog say? Ribbit, ribbit. What does the curlew say? Curlew. And I used to burst out laughing, and I thought it was the funniest thing. And then eventually, my first words were imitations of birds and animals. Now, as it happens, my father doesn't know this is in here, I think, but I actually have a recording of my dad doing an imitation. And he found one of my microphones a few years back, and was, messing about, and he did this into it. He'll be mortified now, I'm sure.
Meow.
But hey, I gotta tell you something. I've gotta move forward in time a little bit before I go back to my early beginnings. Because something really beautiful has happened. And I hope I don't get emotional now, because sometimes I do with this. But so I've had a little daughter. Myself and Alba have had a lovely, beautiful daughter, Laia. It's a Catalan name. Alba's from Barcelona. She's Catalan. Laia is Catalan for softly spoken. Right now, she's doing a lot of screaming. So I don't know if that name is apt just yet, but maybe it will be. Now, Laia, I guess I spent time with her the only way I knew, and that was the way my dad spent time with me, and my mum spent time with me. And so I brought her out into nature, and the same thing has happened with Laia. So it's like me viewing myself as a little child, as an adult, and except I have an iPhone. So now all of the imitations that Laia is doing, I've recorded them. I guess it's what I do. And to see her react to all of these birds, and to yesterday morning, we can hear the dawn chorus through our window. And there was a great tit singing outside. So great tit is a really easy song to learn for people. So they sound like they're saying teacher, 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 teacher. And so when there's patterns repeated like that, a little baby finds it easier to remember. And it was about 5:30 in the morning. The room was dark, but there was a great tit belting it out from outside the window. And in the dark of the room, Laia, with her little voice, starts imitating the great tit. So I've made some recordings of Laia imitating lots of little things, and it's it's beautiful, because it's what I did as a little boy. So here's Laia. What does the horse say? What does the dog say? What does the cat say? What does the cuckoo say? What does the wolf say? And what else is there?
The moon.
What does the sheep say? I know I'm biased, but I think she's the most precious thing. And to bring her out into nature, and to see her connect with it, and to want to interact with it in her way is it's beautiful. It's really beautiful, and it gives me so much hope. My school years were very important, especially now in hindsight when I look back. I guess I was misunderstood by both myself and by the other classmates. Everybody there, and there's nothing wrong with this, but everybody there was obsessed with football, wrestling at the time. We used to watch, they used to watch WWF wrestling. Was Pokemon a thing? I think it was. I had no interest. I couldn't care less. I think Alba has probably explained to me the offside rule of football 100 times, and I still don't have a clue what she's talking about. And I have no intention. I have no intentions of knowing either. But yeah, in school, all I wanted to talk about was birds. All I wanted to think about was birds. I tried to turn every homework exercise into something about birds, and the other kids noticed this. So back then, I think David Beckham had a buzz cut, and all of the other kids had a shaved head too, following their idol, David Beckham. I had a mop of curls, I had a big mop of hair. So as kids, the insult was, "Are you going to get a haircut?" And I also had green Doc Martens when everybody else had Nike Runners. So I didn't do myself any favours, really. So I ended up earning myself the nickname Nature Boy, which was it was a way to kind of give me a dig, to say you're different and we're kind of laughing at you. But I didn't care. I was Nature Boy, and even though I was a little bit embarrassed about being made fun of, I kind of wore it like a badge of pride in a sense, and I remember in the classroom we had this nature table, and I think the nature table is gone now, which is such a shame. But in the back right of the room, there was this nature table. There were great big deer antlers on it. I'd never seen a deer before. Huge deer antlers. There were all kinds of birds' eggs. There were different leaves with labels on them. And I thought this was just spectacular. I didn't care about the maths on the board or the geography lessons. All I wanted to know was about those items and where they came from, and I wanted to know more. But the thing about me is I was not a very calm kid. I was a restless kid, what you would have called a wild child, I suppose. And because I didn't fit in, I spent a lot of time trying to make the other kids laugh. That was my way of, gaining acceptance, from my peers. And that got me into a lot of trouble. And there was one teacher in particular called Mr. McSweeney, and he was nature obsessed, and he was very much involved in the local nature reserve. He used to build bird boxes. He had a great big window that looked out into bird feeders in the class, posters everywhere. And I so desperately wanted to be in that class, but because I was such a lunatic is probably a strong word, but you get me. I was not allowed in that class. That was the class for the good kids, the really well behaved kids with good grades. I had good grades. I just was a bit of a mad fella. I've met Mr. McSweeney since, by the way, and I told him how much I wanted to be in his class, and I don't think he realised, but we're all good now. I still go to Coskinny. So yeah, I was different, and I knew that this was potentially a disadvantage because, despite being different, as a young kid, you still want to fit in. You want to be accepted, you want to be part of something, and I wasn't. And in a sense, I felt, I guess it hurt me a little bit. I did have some friends, but largely I kind of stood out. And so I decided then, at one point, that I need to stop liking nature and I need to like football instead. So I forced myself to watch a game of football, and it was the most excruciatingly boring thing I've ever done in my life. And I promised myself to never do it again. But I did try to pretend I didn't like nature. And in that moment, a pod of orcas, killer whales is another term for them, came into Cork Harbour. And I think everyone in Cove saw them, including all my classmates who didn't really like or care for nature. And I didn't see them. I never saw them. And I look back in that moment and I think that this was nature giving me a kick up the backside for turning my back on it, even though it was brief. My later life was also a bit of a journey, I guess. I went to college. I was 17 years old in college for the entirety of the first year, which meant that I couldn't go out. I couldn't socialise. It's not the be all and end all to go out and drink, but as a young teenager in college, that's often what people do. They want to go out and party And I couldn't because I was underage. I didn't have a fake ID or anything like that. And so I stuck my head down. I did my study. I was studying zoology in UCC. I adored it. But there were some subjects in the beginning that I found tough. Maths, chemistry, physics, I was very bad at. So I was keeping my head down to try and pass those. The other stuff, I devoured it. And then my birthday arrived, and it was late April. And we had study month coming up. We did the exams. And finally, I was 18 and I could go out and celebrate with my friends. And so I did that. I went out and sure, look, had a good time. Maybe had a few too many beers. And I woke up the next morning feeling quite bad, feeling quite hungover, I guess, is what I thought I was experiencing. The other guys, they wanted to go for a second night and I just couldn't. So I went home and I remember feeling kind of ashamed, walking into the house in front of my mother, looking and feeling hungover. And she said, why didn't you go in and put your head down? And that's what I did. And things started to get really bad. And I started to spin in the bed and I started to vomit and I had to run out of the toilet. And then eventually I started to pass out. I started to faint. And so my mother knew something was going on beyond being hungover. And she got me a few things, a few tablets, made some food for me. Couldn't keep the food down. And she went to collect my father, who was working overtime in the Irish Navy at the time. And I went to go to the toilet and I collapsed. And when they came back, I was unconscious, like on the bathroom floor. And then they knew something was going on. So it was quite late. So they called an after hours doctor and they came along. And this is when they realised something was really going on, because I looked at the doctor and I said, Jennifer, I didn't know you were a doctor, referring to my aunt, Jennifer, like she's not a doctor. And I was convinced that this was Jennifer and she had become a doctor overnight. And my parents kind of looked at each other and said, what's going on with him? So she's this person, who was not Jennifer, said that I had the worst case of gastroenteritis that she had seen all night and that it's going around. And that was it. I was given some medication to settle my stomach and they left me. And overnight, as the night went along, my parents realised that it wasn't safe to leave me alone because I was starting to become really delirious. Anytime I would stand up, I would immediately collapse. So it's like the blood flow wasn't powerful enough to keep me ticking. There was one moment where they put me to bed and put a bucket next to me and said, Seán, we're going to put our heads down. Don't get up on your own. If you need us, just knock on the wall, because we had a shared wall. I was delirious. They didn't understand how delirious I was. I got up, I fell over and I chipped my teeth, I burst my lips. And that's when they knew things were bad. So they called a doctor, a local doctor, first thing in the morning to come down. And he said to open the curtains. And when he opened the curtains, I don't remember this, but my parents said that he started to shake. His hands started to shake and he turned white. And he took some of my vitals and he took my mother outside and he said to my mother, Sylvia, I don't know if you realise this, but Seán is in grave danger. And she said, what do you mean he's in grave danger? And he says, all of his vitals are, they're on the edge and he's at risk of dying. I don't know what's happening, but we need to get him out of here immediately. And so I didn't hear this. There was a kind of a sense of panic. I remember there being kind of vials dropped on the ground. This was Dr. Morahan in Cove, by the way. I say panic now. He was very focused. He knew exactly what he was doing. He just wasn't wasting any movements. So any vial he opened, it was thrown on the ground. Papers, when they were done, they were flicked aside. He called another doctor to come down as backup. And he called Cove Hospital to send fluids and various things down in a taxi as a matter of urgency, all while the ambulance was coming. The ambulance came. I was out of it. And I remember saying to my parents, have I hurt somebody? And they said, what do you mean, Seán? And they said, I said, have I hurt somebody? I crashed the car. And they said, Seán, you don't drive. You don't even have a theory test. And, I was in trouble then. They really knew it. So I was brought out in a wheelchair to the hospital and I was lucid still, despite being a bit out of it. And I said to them, what's going on? why am I in an ambulance and why are you driving so fast? And they said, Seán, you've been vomiting and doing, all of that all night. So there's no fluids in your body. You're dehydrated, and we're just bringing you up to rehydrate you. That's all. At this point in time, I was in agony, and I've never felt a pain like it in my life, and I don't think I ever will again. I didn't know it was possible to feel such a pain and be conscious. Like, the only way I can describe it, and this is a very personal memory, and maybe it not be relevant to you, but when I used to play in the playground and my hands were really cold, if I fell and I hit my hands off the cold ground, they were already numbed. The pain was excruciating. Imagine that, multiply it by 10 and course it through your entire body on repeat. That's what it felt like. And so I just remember being in this ambulance, everything streaming past all of the lights. And then I remember getting out of the ambulance and a whole team of people waiting there and just being rushed into the ER. And my parents were crying. My dad was in the ambulance with me, but he was I was watching me, like he was holding back his tears, looking out the window. My mother was in a car behind, and they didn't know what was going on. But what was certain was everything was shutting down. My liver, my heart. This is why I was collapsing. My heart wasn't beating properly. It wasn't beating strong enough, and I couldn't bring the blood to my head when I stood up, so I would collapse. It was just multiple organ failure and septicemia, which is why I felt this coursing fire in my body. And so what happened, it got so bad in the end, they called in my brother, they called in my grandparents, my aunts and uncles to say goodbye. To say goodbye to me, like, somebody who just turned 18 and without celebrating his end of year exams, Seán is going to die. And they had to bring in a social worker. No, I'm not religious, but my mother is. And so they brought a priest in as well to give me last rites. And, everybody was just in a waiting room, like, but not just any kind of a waiting room. They're waiting for my death, like, talking to a social worker. And they came in to me to say goodbye to me. I knew that that's what they were doing because I had overheard something. And I remember my brother was crying at the door, and my mum told him to stop crying, like, because Seán can't see you like that, because he's going through enough already, like. And so they came in, like, and they said goodbye to me, and I said, like, I'm not going anywhere, like. So I had to sit up and compose myself, and then I realised that, like, I couldn't lie down because I wasn't falling asleep. I was dying, like, and that's just a crazy thing to be aware of, especially as a teenager. And I was really lucky because Professor Mary Horgan came in on her day off, and I saw her in a tracksuit and runners going upstairs. And she was working on my bloods, and in the last minute she found out that it was meningitis, and she saved me basically. But this is a very emotional thing to talk about, and you might wonder why I'm talking about this when I'm here to talk about birds. But it took me a long time to recover. I was in an isolation ward, and I remember, like, struggling so much in my head. Like, how do you digest that, like, mentally? I was a kid, like, and I was on my own in this isolation ward because it was so dangerous for people to come in contact with what I had. And with all the medication that I was on, I had insomnia as well. And my brain invented these characters that didn't exist. So people that were coming to visit me and kind of console me, which, the brain is a powerful thing, and it does powerful things when you need it to. And that's what kind of got me through mentally. But not just that, I had a tiny little window to my right. And I would look out at the birds and, like, think of the amazing birds that I wouldn't see if I didn't, fight this and get past it. And in that moment, I knew that I was going to get out. Like, I had heart issues and I wasn't all clear just yet. But I knew that I was going to get past it and get out and devote my life to nature, to studying nature and to bringing that joy to other people. And that's one of the reasons I am who I am, and I am where I am, I guess. I'm so fortunate, I'm so happy to be in the position that I'm in now, because now I study wildlife, the thing that I've loved so much from a little boy, for a living. And I know now that looking out the window, daydreaming, thinking about birds as that little boy who didn't fit in wasn't a waste of time. This was my way. Education doesn't have to be, squared off into this box or that box. People are different, and it's okay to take different routes. And I'm sure that there are other kids like me who perhaps don't do well at school, or feel like it's not for them. And I guess what I'm saying is it's okay to be different, and it's okay to follow your own path. These are two birds, first of all, that are back now. And there's something very special about this one in particular. So this bird is called willow warbler. So it's named after the fact that it likes to spend time in willows, and willows tend to grow in wet places. And that's where you find willow warblers, often on the edges of lakes, in bogs, in willow often, but not solely. And they have this amazing song. It's this sweet lyrical song that starts high up and sounds like a ball sweetly descending down a stairs. Now that might sound like a strange description, but keep it in your mind as I play it now, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. Isn't that just absolutely gorgeous? So this is a bird as well that has just come from south of the Sahara. This bird has hung out with hippos. This bird has seen lions and giraffes. And now I record it singing like this above my head in Cuscany Nature Reserve, the place that, raised me as a little boy. And I've got one more to show you. And this is a song that I'm sure you'll all know. And this sound is a real harbinger, and the sight of it too, a harbinger of spring and summer. And it's especially nice to see your first one after a dark, grey, damp winter. It's a swallow, of course. I want to tell you one thing before I go into this. So swallow, it was only discovered as recently as 2020 that female swallows also sing. And this is an increasing trend in terms of the discovery of female song. And this is as a result of an observer bias in the workplace. So more men than women tended to work in ornithology in the past, and this is now changing, and women are paying closer attention and saying, hey, you completely overlooked the fact that this female sings as well. It's not just the male. So anyway, this one is a male swallow, and it's the real sound of summer. Isn't that one of the most beautiful sounds ever? It instantly brings you to a warm, sunny, happy place. It's the sound of summer to me. And, it's something that I realise now that I'm really lucky to be able to listen to, because having that close call put all of these things into perspective, really. And it really opened up my eyes and my mind to everything that's out there. So yeah, I hope that you enjoyed that, and that you can feel the same kind of joy that I do when you hear these things. Thank you so much for listening to episode 1 of the Seán Chorus podcast. And don't forget that I'm going to be back every Thursday with a brand new episode packed full of sound and story, each episode unique. There are just so many sounds and stories that they're overflowing from my desktop, so I've got a lot to get out, and I really can't wait to share them with you. So if you enjoyed this podcast and the themes within, please pass on the word and tell a friend about it. And you can also hit subscribe and follow to continue along the journey with me.
This show is part of the HeadStuff Podcast Network, a hub for the creative and the curious. Shows are produced in association with HeadStuff and the Podcast Studios Dublin. Find out more or become a member at headstuffpodcasts.com.